So this past week in Milan, Suzuki, after a quarter century, has finally released what is the new revision of the DR-Z4S and 400SM models. In a very original fashion, they have labeled them the DR-Z4S and the 4SM, not really changing up too much. Now, I have personally owned one of the DR-Z400 models of what is going to be the prior generation and ridden it for a good few thousand miles. What I'm going to be talking about today is really just where I see the differences in the two bikes, what seems to be virtually the same, and some of the gripes that I'm having that I'm already coming up with after seeing the spec sheet that's been released by Suzuki themselves. If you can please share your thoughts. Are you excited for this bike? Do you think this will be one of the new bikes that you have in your garage? I would love to hear what everyone thinks about Suzuki changing up this bike after 25 years of service from the prior generation. Okay, hats off to Suzuki's marketing team because these promo videos got me really fired up for both bikes, to be totally honest with you. If we're talking about the overall aesthetic, I think the bike looks great. This is gonna be obviously very subjective. The headlight is something that's a little lackluster for me, not really my taste. But in terms of the restyle of the bike itself, how the plastics look, and how the overall fit and finish looks on the bike, this is a nice improvement, a nice modernization of what the 400S and 400SM had in the past. And overall, I don't have many complaints on how the bike actually looks. So I think we can all agree that modern plastics, LED outfittings, that's great. But let's talk about what has actually changed with the engine. Now I'm gonna go straight into the specs. We are reading virtually within 1 to 2 horsepower or foot-pounds of torque, exactly the same horsepower and torque specs that we have seen on the prior generation DR-Z400 model. Now, here's why I think that's actually a great thing and a great win with this bike. So take this into consideration. This bike was first produced in 1999, if I'm not mistaken. And we have gone through 25 years of regulations, of stricter emissions laws. I honestly thought that if this ever came to fruition like it is right now, that this bike would be so gutted that we would just have essentially a shell of what the DR-Z400 is today. Now, to draw an analogy to this, 2018, we had Honda come out with the CRF 450L, which is now the CRF 450RL. The point is that the 450L had abysmal specs in terms of horsepower, in terms of maintenance intervals. What we come to find out after it being in production for over 5 years is that people add a Vortex ECU, they add a full exhaust system, and then it wakes the bike up by 10 to 20% in performance gains. And then we find out that the maintenance intervals actually aren't as stringent as they really need to be with the long-term mileage reviews that we've seen out there. So I guess what my point is that the fact that they were able to still recreate a 398cc engine that's producing almost the same torque and horsepower figures in today's emission standards, I think that's a win because we all know damn well that once this bike has a full exhaust system, it has a flash on the ECU, whatever it might be, it's gonna wake it up. The whole point of this bike is to modify it. It's not to keep it stock. And I hope that the aftermarket rushes in to start configuring new things for this bike. And so that's where I'm gonna leave the engine performance. I think that many people are calling it a con. I think given the context of today's emission standards, I actually think that's a W, and the reasons that I just explained. So the spec sheet is going to be controversial. I think the other huge part of this is the addition of EFI to the bike. Now, depending on who you are as a person, this is going to be good or bad. If you like less maintenance and tinkering with your bike, EFI is going to be good. If you like tinkering with your bike, if you know how to pull apart a carburetor and fix it on the go, you're probably going to want the carbureted version a little bit more. This is going to affect the modifications that you're going to do. It's going to change how you overall tune the bike. My personal take is that EFI can draw in a larger audience because of the simplicity when it works. Now, if it fails, obviously EFI is not going to be your friend in that scenario. But generally speaking, we know these bikes to be very reliable. I think EFI is going to be more edged on the side of pros versus cons for many people out there in helping a larger audience get excited for this bike because it is a more modern addition to the engine. Now I want to talk about the things that really bother me about this bike. The first one being no sixth gear. I think across the board, everyone hates that this bike, after 25 years, has still not gotten a sixth gear. Now, I'll caveat this because some people have talked about the gear ratios being a little bit wider, which would help in theory. That would be nice. But it does kill me at the end of the day that we could not get a sixth gear. But here we are, and we have to deal with it. So that is probably going to be the biggest thing that kills me about this bike. The second thing, throttle by wire, ride modes, excessive electronic-based controls are going to be more points of failure. I don't like the idea of a DR-Z adding 3 different ride modes, a traction control system, a gravel mode to it. I think it's really just Suzuki not understanding who the core audience is of the people who own these bikes. Maybe they haven't done any market research since 1999 when they first released the DR-Z models, but this bike is not meant for people who are going to be putting it into gravel mode. I really resent the fact that we're going more towards rider modes and things that are electronic based because, again, as I said, it's a point of failure. It's very gimmicky at the best. It really just isn't going to be the same raw experience that you get with throttle by cable, with a carburetor, with a more raw bike. I also understand that they have to put in more modern features. I really just think that this is so excessive and a miss with all the different electronic-based systems they tried to throw at this bike for a place that it's really just not needed. The last thing that also keeps me up at night with the new DR-Z is the fact that this has not trimmed any weight from the prior generation. The S is coming in at 333 pounds with the SM coming in at 340 pounds. That's the estimation posted on Suzuki's website. That is going up from the roughly 320 pound wet weight that we had with the DR-Z4S and 400 SM models. Logically, I can understand that more electronics means more parts associated with the bike that are going to weigh it down. Shoot, if they just maintain the weight at around 320 pounds, I'm even okay with that. But again, here we are. We're with a bike that is now almost the same dimensions, but even heavier than what it was in the past. I don't think it's a huge deal. It's just disappointing to see Suzuki, again, not trim any weight from it whatsoever, to actually add weight to an already heavy bike, a heavy dual sport. That's a gripe of mine. I think most people are going to be on the same page that that part also sucks. In conclusion, I gotta say, I am excited for this bike. No matter what direction Suzuki went, with either changing the bike entirely, with barely refining it, kind of like how they've done with this model of just making it more modern and not adding anything too crazy to the mix, they're going to be wrong either way. The status of the DR-Z400 for the past 25 years has been so profound that there's not going to be a scenario where everyone's happy with the result. Who knows? We'll see what happens when it actually comes out. I'm going into it with an open mind. I know some people are really upset with how little change there's been. We will have to see when the bike actually comes out to market and we're able to hop on and ride them ourselves. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Again, I would love to hear your thoughts about the bike, if you're excited for it, if you want to look into one in the future. I have one for about a couple of years and I really enjoyed it, and I do want one once I have the space to have a third bike, but I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know in the comments section below, and I will catch you on the next one.